Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another ship fitting guide for EVE Echoes. In today's video we're going to be looking at another one of the Tech Level 7 Assault Destroyers, this time around the Corax Assault. Now a lot of you folks have been asking in the comment section for a while now for me to cover the Corax line of destroyers in their own unique video. I will get around to that, I promise. We're going to start with the Corax Assault today because it's the one that a lot of you are asking about directly, and I want to do a comparison comparing it to the Talwar Assault, because one of the reasons I've not really touched on the Corax Assault, the Corax line of destroyers all that much, is for the most part, they're sadly outshone by the Talwar. If you want a ship that does something with missiles, chances are the Talwar line of destroyers do it better than the Corax line do. Not exclusively true, but it is majority the case, and it's a shame because look, this is a cool looking ship. That is absolutely badass. It actually looks like a destroyer. This thing looks like it is going to turn up and ruin your day. So what we're going to do in today's video then is basically, we're going to look at what this ship is, what it does, how to fit it and how to use it. But we are going to do that with the understanding that this is a ship that is ever so slightly problematic. It's got some really interesting skills and abilities to it, but they just don't translate in quite the way I'd want them to. Anyway, if you do enjoy this video or find it useful, let me know by hitting like on it, sub to the channel for all things EVE Echoes, ding that notification bell to never miss an upload, and of course let me know in the comment section down below what ships you want to see me cover in future videos. If you want to go the extra mile to help support this channel on Patreon, you can do so as well. Details are on screen now. That said and done then, let's talk about the Corax Assault. As I mentioned earlier, the Corax Assault is the Caldari State's Tech Level 7 Assault Destroyer. That means if we jump through to the Caldari State tree, climb the Destroyer branch to Tech Level 7, there it is, the Corax Assault in all its badass glory. And I have to say, I adore this ship. It looks fantastic. It looks like a futuristic nuclear submarine crossed with a Viking longboat. It just looks amazing, and that makes the fact that it's outclassed in almost every aspect by the Talwar Assault even more insulting and more disappointing. Anyway, let's have a look at its attributes and fittings. Now, like the Talwar Assault, it's got 4 high slots, 2 mid slots, 4 low slots, and then 3 of each of the power grid and mechanical rigs. It does have a couple of advantages over the Talwar Assault though, first of which is its power grid. The Corax Assault here has a power grid of 65 megawatts, whereas the Talwar Assault only has 53. The trouble is, I never found the Talwar Assault's power grid particularly restrictive, and that extra 12 megawatts, even after you include things like destroyer skills and start going into things like power grid rigs, just isn't enough to really start to put anything overly interesting on here, which is, honestly, really a shame. But again, maybe you've found something that I haven't here. The second advantage that the Corax Assault has over the Talwar is its shields. Now, the overall defense of 6,270 is lower than the Talwar Assault, but it does have a larger shield at 2,257, which makes that shield considerably more tanky than the Talwar Assault's is. Ultimately, once you get through the shield into the armor and the structure, however, the Talwar Assault does have slightly higher values in those overall, giving an overall higher defense than the Corax Assault has. And as we come down though, things do get slightly even more disappointing. Signature radius of 62.6 meters is larger than the Talwar Assault, the flight velocity of 214 is slower than the Talwar Assault, and the scan resolution of 563 is also lower than the Talwar Assault. And if you're beginning to get the impression that this is just like a budget Talwar Assault, that's kind of what it is, and that's why this is so disappointing. I do feel that ultimately destroyers are in a bit of an unusual situation anyway. They're kind of a weird middle ground between frigates and cruisers, and at this point in time they don't do either thing well enough to actually warrant a position really in the long run. There are some exceptions to that, of course, but the Corax Assault really does fall through the cracks as far as I'm concerned, and it doesn't get any better once we start looking at the trait descriptions. Roll bonus 25% missile torpedo velocity, awesome. Extra range, and the missiles hit their target faster. All for that, that's amazing. 5-second increase to damage control activation time. You guys know how much I love my damage control units. I think they're a great little module if they're used correctly, and the fact that this takes it from 13 seconds activation up to 18 seconds can only be a good thing. That extra 5 seconds makes a big difference on a ship like this. Then we look at the skill bonuses. Advanced Small Missile Torpedo Operation gives a bonus of 7.5% small missile torpedo damage, which is the same as the Talwar Assault. Both ships have that exact same bonus. 37.5% increase to small missile torpedo damage, meaning that those 4 turrets actually work as if they were kind of 5 high points instead. Just over 5 high points, 5 missile launches. The difference here is, yes, the Corax Assault does get an additional 10% additional small missile torpedo explosion velocity. 50% small missile torpedo explosion velocity increase. That's awesome, right? Well, yes, until you understand that small missiles have amazing explosion velocity as it is. This doesn't really do much. Small missiles aren't lacking in explosion velocity to begin with. This just means that, congratulations, you hit drones a little bit better. I suppose that's kind of it. Or the very fastest of ships, if you're going up against something like, for example, I don't know, a Succubus or a Dramiel, this may be able to apply the damage that little bit more, but I don't know, it just feels underwhelming to me. And unfortunately, if you've come here looking for my usual happy-go-lucky Benzie video here, I am going to tell you now, this doesn't get much better as we go on, but it does get better a bit. Anyway, Advanced Destroyer Command gives the same as the Talwar Assault, a 7.5% increase to Stasis Weber Fire Optimal Range. Very useful if someone turns up in something like a Daredevil that has longer range webs and is sitting there trying to scram kite you, trying to web kite you. You can just sit there, laugh, and still hit them with the webs anyway. That's cool. But then a 7.5% increase with Energy Nosferatu Optimal Range. That's a really interesting dichotomy that we're looking at here. You've got one skill that says, I want to keep you at range as long as possible. I want to keep you as far away from me as possible. Then you've got another skill that says, I want to be able to get up close and personal and use an Energy Nosferatu. And make no mistake, the increase there, that 37.5% across the board, takes it from a 4 kilometer optimal range and a 2 kilometer fall off to a 2 kilometer fall off still, but with a 5.5 optimal range. So you go from 4, 6, and 8 to 5.5, 7.5, and 9.5. It really doesn't change much, and that's disappointing. You've kind of got skills that say I want to get close, and you've got another skill that says I want to keep the opponent at range. And I guess you can kind of roll with that it means you can do both things, but neither of those skills is overly powerful enough to warrant being a completely separate entity. And that's the Corax Assault in a nutshell. It wants to be two different things, but it doesn't really excel at either of those. This is the literal definition of a destroyer in EVE Echoes. It's stuck in that middle place, and it's not sure whether it wants to go one direction or the other, so it's kind of stuck in the middle, not really doing either. But let's have a look at fitting this, because all is not lost. During the Talwar Assault video, I mentioned a guy in the Catskill Cartel called Mine, who I sat and had lengthy discussions with. Mine is an absolute genius when it comes to this kind of stuff, and has a very brilliant analytical mind for number crunching and all that kind of thing. Now, he helped me out an awful lot with the Talwar Assault video, and it was actually him who sent this Corax Assault hull through for me to have a play around with, and we've both been having a lot of conversations about this. Now, yes, okay, I've spent the last few minutes absolutely wailing on the Corax Assault, but I do need to qualify that. I'm not even saying this is a bad ship. It's not. It's not a bad ship. It's just not as good as the Talwar Assault, and that is kind of problematic when they're the same cost and like materials pretty much to build as each other. In most cases, you do kind of just want to go for the Talwar Assault. That said, most cases is not all cases, and I would make the argument that the Corax Assault is actually slightly better in prolonged PvE than the Talwar is. The Talwar does have the issue that it's not overly capacitor stable. It's got a low power grid, low capacitor. It does lose that fairly quickly, whereas the Corax Assault, thanks to that dichotomy of skills there, the fact that it's trying to be two ships at once, does give it the ability to adjust in combat accordingly. Now, what I mean by this is, when we have a look at here, you've got that skill down here, Weber Fire Optimal Range and Nosferatu Optimal Range. This means that I can keep range and use the Weber Fire's bonus in order to keep other ships at arm's reach when that's needed, allows me to screen off drones, allows me to hold on to things like, for example, slashers or condors, those faster moving little gnats that you find in PvE encounters. But then the Nosferatu means that when I start getting a little bit low on capacitor, I can dive in, up close and personal, and start to drain their ship's capacitor in order to fund mine. It just helps me recover a little bit, and that makes the Corax arguably better when it comes to prolonged PvE. Now, I did give this a try with torpedoes as well, because I thought, you know what, it's got range bonuses, it's got the explosion velocity bonus, and it's got that Nosferatu bonus. Maybe this is supposed to be a proper brawling ship using like torpedoes and the Nosferatu. I tried it, I could not get it to work. Yeah, okay, the damage was absolutely terrifying when I was in range, but it was very easy for things to outrange me, and it took a long time getting from ship to ship, which meant it actually took longer to clear anomalies. That meant I ultimately ended up settling on just going for small missile launches. You see here I've gone for 4 disciplined small missile launches because of that additional range. 28.23 kilometers I can engage at, thanks to the rigs and skills on this particular ship. Still excellent damage, and I can be doing that damage whether I'm at 5 kilometers and using the Nosferatu, or whether I'm at that full 28 kilometers trying to outrange anything there that should be a little bit closer. If I see someone come up to me with like blasters, I can sit there with that web of fire on them, keep them at arm's range and hit them with the missiles. If I find that I'm up against something with like the slower tracking strike cannons, for example, I can get right up in their grill and still be able to do just as good on the damage. The mid-slots, therefore, are, of course, a Vricolakus small energy Nosferatu and an interruptive stasis Werbefire. I don't think I need to explain why those fit there. It's fairly obvious, considering the discussion we've just had. This means I've gone for a Ranger small afterburner, a micro... I did actually play around with a dual prop fit on this for a while, using an afterburner and a micro warp drive. Micro warp drive to get from A to B quicker with those torpedoes, and then the afterburner to maintain an orbit. Again, I just found that I was too long outside of combat, not doing enough, and things became a little bit fragile at that point. So, of course, talking about fragile, I put a basic damage control on. Flat shield, armor, and structure damage resistances across the board there increased by nearly 8%. That's with it cold. You can obviously activate that for an 18-second duration of near invulnerability. Very useful when a new wave spawns in PvE. You're going to start taking a lot of damage, you activate that damage control, then proceed to tank the rest of the wave. Talking about tanking, a Posse adaptive invulnerability field rounds out those resistances. Nice high resistances across the board here with this all active, means I take as little damage as possible, and finally then a veteran small shield booster tops that up as I take damage. Ultimately, you might find you have luck with that torpedo build. It's worth giving it a try. To do the torpedo, basically lose the damage control, put in a micro warp drive, and fill the top slots with things like torpedo launchers. Looking then at the rigs, in the power grid rigs, we've gone for Warhead Calefaction Catalyst, flat out damage bonus there, a bay loading accelerator for the activation time adjustment. Never go for 2 of the Warhead Calefaction Catalysts, go for 1 catalyst, 1 accelerator. Then finally, a hydraulic bay thrusters to give me that additional flight velocity. That was ultimately used there to try and make the torpedoes work a bit better for me, but actually still has the benefit of giving me the extra range there with the missiles, which allows me to start firing them sooner onto distant targets, and allows me to pull away further if I'm up against something that is a little bit shorter range than short range and high damage. For the mechanical rigs, dynamic fuel valve, just to make sure that when I activate my afterburner, it's using as little capacitor as possible, and auxiliary thrusters to give the extra flight velocity adjustment to allow me to move away. You can swap the dynamic fuel valve there for something like the polycarbonate engine housing to give yourself a little bit extra inertia modifier. This is a fairly slow and hefty moving ship. I found that even with the polycarbonate engine housing, that just wasn't cutting it. Anyway, semiconductor memory cell then comes through in the 3rd and final place there. I had a 3rd slot available to me. I had looked through the different options, and this one seemed like the best thing to go for. Just making that capacitor a little bit bigger allows it to maintain the capacitor stability a little bit longer, gives me more opportunity to use that damage control unit when I need to, and just it means I can be out of the Nosferatu range for that little bit longer. Because if I were to take the Nosferatu off, you'll see that when I unfit that, I do lose cap stability down to 1 minute 35. That was even lower before I fitted that rig. Obviously, once I'm in Nosferatu range, I do become, again, capacitor stable. Now, in order to showcase this in effect, I'm jumping here into a Tier 7 Angel Medium Anomaly. We're going to jump in, we're going to give this one a go and see how it does. So I've warped in at around the 30k mark. I'm going to lock onto absolutely everything. I'm looking at my targets right away. I think I'm going to go for that scythe first of all, and aim for about the 20-odd kilometer mark away on an orbit. Let's get that at about a 28 kilometer mark orbit, activate the afterburner, put the damage control unit on and the adaptive field, and wow, I've taken a massive hit of damage there. That's fine, we can repair that up as we start to move away. Now, as we start to move away, I am going to move onto that breacher, and I'm going to start firing my missiles at that. Let's take that one out before it gets too close and starts becoming a problem. This is the advantage here of the Corax. You do get that ability to kind of pick and choose your targets as you go. So I've got a Breacher Assault, a Talwar Assault, which should be next on my list because it's something of a similar size. Let's orbit that one at about the 25-28 kilometer margin, somewhere there. And you can see that in order to get away, I've had to use quite a bit of my capacitor to get some range and to heal things up, but that's okay. If things start to get a little bit ropey on the capacitor, I can pull in later and start using that Nosferatu. Now that I'm at 100%, I am going to turn that shield booster off for now. You'll see that I don't necessarily need it at this kind of range. I can just activate it when and if I need a top-up. 24 kilometers away for that Talwar Assault. What is actually the range on the webs? They're 16.9 kilometers. So anything that gets within 16.9, I'm going to web to make sure I just do a little bit of extra damage to it. But you can see, for the most part, I'm not taking much in the way of return fire, but every smack that I do, 1598. That is a big lot of damage. Yeah, okay, it looks a little bit disappointing on paper when you see 202.82 DPS, but every smack really does count. Now I can sit here and actually activate the shield booster for a little bit of time just to get some more. There we go. Start topping up my shields. And going from a distance here. Let's start on that scythe next. That's right out here away from the rest of the group. So again, big smacks of damage there. Here comes the next load. 1721. Big hits. This is enough that if you go into a PvP anomaly and you happen to find someone in a cruiser, you can probably two-volley them. It's an astonishing amount of damage. In a frigate, you can two-volley them. Absolutely staggering amount of damage. And even against cruisers, as you saw in the Talwar Assault video, you can very quickly deal enough damage to take them out as well. Okay, we are slowly working our way through that scythe now. I think another smack or two should be enough to finish that one off. Then we can start looking at the capacitor. You see, at this point, I'm still maintaining capacitor around 50%. That's still a solid amount of capacitor. It's recharging enough that I'm not overly worried that I'm about to run dry anytime soon, and I can still be using the shield booster here just to keep myself topped up. I don't think I've dropped below 80% in a while. A couple of cycles of that just to go up there, and I've now got the damage control available as well. So, to showcase this, if I were then to go into, say, the 5 kilometer orbit there, here around the scythe, what I would then do is, as we start to go in, I prepare to probably take a bit of extra damage as I've no longer got the same angular velocity I had before, at which point, once I'm happy that I'm going to be able to use it for the most part, activate that damage control unit. Does take a hit on the capacitor again, so you need to have a decent amount for it, but I'm going to take almost nothing as we close that final distance in on the scythe now. This then allows me to activate that Nosferatu once I'm within the 12 kilometer margin. There we go, and I'm going to start refilling my capacitor. I am going to now run out of damage control, which means I will take a bit of extra damage as we go here, but I'm actually going to do a manual maneuver, double tap in space. We're going to start moving towards that ship there, which, yes, is the Hurricane prototype. Good, good. There we go, taking a bit of damage as we do so as we pass that scythe. That's fine. We're manually going in close up to the Hurricane, turn off the Nosferatu on there, and apply it to the Hurricane. And whilst we do so, I'm going to focus fire then on the Cyclone. Now, the idea here is that I'm going to be orbiting the Hurricane nice and closely, hopefully under its guns, although looking at it, is that the no, it's the Cyclone, sorry, that's the Cyclone that's hitting me with missiles, that's okay. I want to orbit the Hurricane because the Hurricane has the cannons. No, that's weird. That's weird. The game has fit them backwards. The Cyclone actually has the cannons, and the Hurricane is the one firing the missiles. Okay, so we're going to orbit the Cyclone for our for high angular velocity to deal with the turrets, and instead I'm going to use the missiles on the Hurricane and take that one out whilst orbiting the Cyclone. That's really weird. The Cyclone is very much a missile cruiser. I mean, I've done a video on the Cyclone. It's a missile ship. Why is the Cyclone hitting me with turrets, whereas the Hurricane there is firing missiles at me? That's so weird. That's so weird. Am I missing something here? Am I missing something? Is it secretly supposed to fit the Hurricane with missiles? Is that what's supposed to happen? I don't know. That just seems wrong. Anyway, let's get the Nosferatu now up and running on that Cyclone, now that I'm close enough to it to actually be getting some draining. And you can see I'll start to refill the capacitor, and I'm still hitting that Hurricane from 18 kilometers away, because 28 kilometer missiles are great fun. Yeah, I've taken a bit more damage simply because I got my target priority there wrong. Do go for whichever ship has the turrets. Kill the missiles and orbit the turrets, because you can see here the Cyclone now is just going to keep on missing me. Once the Hurricane is firing its missiles you know always do some amount of damage. Here it comes, that's going to hit and always do something. Whereas the turrets will miss me as long as I am orbiting at a high enough angular velocity to cope with it. And you can see the capacitor is refilling, the shield is still doing its thing, and I'm about to have the damage control unit back again so that we can keep this going pretty much for a length of time. I've skipped ahead a little bit here just because, my goodness, Cyclones are tanky as all heck. But you can see I've managed to completely refill my shields, and my capacitor is pretty much tip-top as well. Sitting there, what, 91% currently? A couple more hits then on the Cyclone, and we're going to get the next wave come in. And it's just I wanted to showcase what happens when a new wave spawns in on an anomaly like this, how you deal with it using a ship like this. So we're about to do that last smack of damage to the Cyclone. Down it goes. I wait for the new ships to appear, and as soon as they start appearing, I'm going to hit the lock-on, and I'm going to hit the damage control as well. Again, I pick a target. This time we're going to go with the Breacher. Hit that Breacher first, and of course a little bit of lag means, no, the game's going to say you're not going to target that Breacher. You're going to shoot at the random Hurricane that we're not going to kill for ages. Yay, thank you, game. Anyway. So, we launched the missiles there at the Breacher. You see, I'm not taking much in the way of damage at all. I'm not orbiting a particular target, and the game freezes for a moment. There we go. We're back. We're back. It's okay. Panic over. I am getting a new phone too soon. I think this one's beginning to show some signs of its age now. It's time for me to upgrade, and I will do a video on that as well when I get the new one. Very, very excited. Should be here, hopefully, by the end of the month. Anyway, so we're going to continue taking out the breaches. Breaches, of course, pose a little bit of a threat to us. I am going to de-lock one of those Hurricanes as well, just to pre-lock onto the Talwar. That Talwar, let's lock in there with a web of fire, stop it moving, and shoot in there. Hello, Captain Washburn. Off you go. This anomaly is already in use. But there we go. Let's get rid of that Talwar Assault. There we go. One more hit. And basically that's what I'm trying to get at here. That when it comes down to it, when you come to changing the waves, you just activate your damage control unit, which you should have ready at that point in time. If you don't have it ready, just continue to orbit whilst you refill your capacitor and shields. Turn your weapons off for a bit of time whilst that all refills. You'll see here, I'm going in for that short orbit here now on the Bellicose, so that I can get the Nosferatu working, capacitor refilling, whilst we shoot the Bellicose. Just like I did with the Hurricane, I'm going to leech off one ship that I don't see as a particular threat, whilst slowly pulling down the ones that I do see as a bigger threat as well. And you can see that's really helping keep my capacitor stable. Anyway, I am now beginning to say the same things over and over again because I've showcased now how to do the anomalies like this. It's just now the repetition of actually doing it. I do hope that's been insightful for you. Again, I want to apologise. I don't like doing videos where it feels like I'm ranting and saying, oh, this is a terrible ship, rah, rah, rah. I don't like that. When I started as a content creator, one of the first things I said was, I want to be a positive force in whatever community I'm in. I don't want to be that guy who moans and complains about things, but destroyers, I think there is a conversation that needs to be had about destroyers, and I think the Corax Assault really does sum that up, that there's no place for it. It kind of falls between the cracks by trying to be both things at once. It's trying to reach across and be as fast and hard to hit as a frigate is, whilst at the same time it's trying to be as heavy hitting as a cruiser, and it just doesn't quite work out thanks to how the meta is right now, and that's that tanking is king, and cruisers can fit a decent enough brawl tank. Some things like, you know, a Mala or a Moa have a decent enough just overall tank that they can take the hits, and then you have frigates that can speed tank, and destroyers just aren't capable of doing either right now, and that's a problem, I think. But anyway, that's another topic for another video. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below, both in regards to destroyers and to the Corax in particular. I don't want you guys to think that I hate the Corax. I don't want you to sit there and think, oh, I bought the Corax, am I an idiot, I should sell it and buy a Talwar. Not at all. Perhaps you can find out something about the Corax line of ships that I couldn't. Perhaps you're going to spot something that's really awesome and makes them stand out. Do let me know, I'd be intrigued to know. Anyway, folks, thank you ever so much for watching right to the end. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.